Some startups go up, others go down. Welcome to GeekWire's Elevator Pitch, presented by West River Group, where three entrepreneurs pitch their businesses in the 32 seconds it takes to get to the top of Seattle's historic Smith Tower. We'll hear from three startup founders as they pitch their emerging businesses to our panel of leading investors and entrepreneurs. Let's meet our judges. Anthony Bontrager, a longtime entrepreneur, media executive, and venture investor who enjoys working with startups as managing director of West River Group and cycling throughout the Pacific Northwest. Maria Colacurcio, CEO of Syndio, mom of seven, and fitness enthusiast who is committed to embedding workplace equity into the fabric of companies around the world. Kirby Winfield of venture capital firm Ascend. He's a Seattle entrepreneur with 2 IPOs and 2 exits under his belt and counts more than 80 startup investments to his name. The clock is ticking. Find out which entrepreneur has what it takes to make it to the top.
Hi, my name is Katherine. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Strella.
Welcome to Smith Tower, going up.
The carbon emissions on food waste are greater than that of all U.S. transportation combined. In order for us to solve this problem, we created a proprietary sensing technology coupled with software that predicts the ripeness of produce. We started by helping Washington State apple and pear growers organize their inventory based on maturity to reduce waste and improve quality. We've monitored over 2 billion pieces of fruit to date, and have recently closed an $8 million Series A to expand into other supply chain segments and commodities. Hi.
So tell us a little bit how you do that. My understanding is that fruits specifically can kind of give off a gas that's part of their maturation, if you will. So is that what your technology does? Is it senses those emissions, and based upon that, you're able to kind of tell where it is in its life cycle?
Exactly. So if you've ever heard one bad apple spoils the bunch, or if you've ever put an unripe banana next to a ripe one, you see that ripens a lot faster than if it was by itself. And this is because produce communicates with each other as it's ripening. There's some sort of evolutionary advantage to all the fruit on a tree ripening at the same time. And so what we do is we intercept those communications between fruits and produce as they're talking with our proprietary sensing technology.
Interesting. And is it a device that you put by the fruit? So give us a little sense more on the technology side then.
Yeah, so we have basically 2 sensor versions. So one of them goes in storage rooms. So some produce items are actually stored for a long period of time. Fun fact, an apple in a grocery store can be over a year old actually. And so we can put sensors inside those storage rooms and monitor the fruit as it's ripening. Or we have a mobile version of our sensor that goes on a truck or a shipping container. So we measure the maturity of the product as it's moving, so that by the time it arrives at port or at a distribution center, we can say, hey, truck number 3 is a little bit more mature than the other ones. That one needs to get shipped to Costco or Walmart first.
Can you tell us a little bit about the competitive space? How do you look at the space and differentiation?
Yeah, totally. Well, food waste in general is a huge problem, and there's no one silver bullet for it. So there are demand planning solutions like Shelf Engine that try to figure out, well, how much produce do I need on my store shelves to keep them full, but not overstock to the point where I have food waste. And what we do is we approach it from the other side, which is kind of like supply planning, right? We're working with a product that isn't perfectly produced in a factory. We're working with something that was produced outside, and sometimes it's not always clear how many apples you have or how many pears you've got. And so we measure the maturity of that product, and we can work with someone like a demand planning software together in tandem to help reduce food waste overall.
And when you think about your go-to-market for this, how are you positioning it? Is it a sustainability positioning play? Are you wrapping in elements of ESG, or is there a compliance angle for folks in order to comply with something or be part of the regulatory landscape, or how are you positioning it?
That's a really great question. Unfortunately, there isn't very much regulation around ag in general. So we always take the bottom line and top line approach. So food waste obviously isn't great for anybody at all. And when you waste food, you're losing money. And so we really very much take the profitability approach on the sustainability aspect. But I think that helps us it helps us scale a sustainable business in a profitable way, and have a really strong business model on top of something that we really care about improving in the world.
So I'm curious on the data element here. So you've got the sensor, it basically is telling you how long that particular item has to go before it's bad. Can you go into a little more detail on that?
Yeah, totally. So we measure a number of different metrics. So for example, temperature is super important when you're thinking about preserving perishable products. So we look at temperature, we look at a number of other factors like CO2, respiration rates, oxygen levels, and things like that. And then we combine all of that data into basically a predictive model that tells us how long do we think this is actually going to last. We offer dashboards for certain customers. So in our supplier side, like when we're working with apple and pear suppliers, we offer a standalone dashboard, and that basically outputs a queue of like, here's the room of apples that you need to open next. For other customers like retailers, we are just an API or a webhook that directly integrates in their existing warehouse management software and does automatic reshuffling of their inventory.
Oh, that's great.
How do you charge for this?
Yeah, we charge on kind of a subscription-based model. So basically, we charge for access to our dashboard or access to the data. So for packers and importers for whom we have a standalone dashboard, we charge for access to it. So packers get per room per year subscription access. Importers get per container trip access. And then on the retail side, we charge per volume, so per pallet of fruit that we monitor.
Can you tell us a little bit about you? Like why is your background suited to this? What caused you to take interest in this?
So I actually came across this idea when I was a student studying at Penn, and I was procrastinating to get into graduate school for neuroscience, actually. And something about an 8-year-long PhD and studying neurons wasn't really doing it for me. So what I ended up doing was reading a stat that 40% of food is wasted before it's consumed, which I thought was a statistic that doesn't belong in the 21st century. And then that was swiftly followed by a wave of guilt, because I was like, I don't even know where my produce comes from. Like, I don't even know where my food comes from. I just take it for granted that I can go to the store and buy stuff. And so all of that led to eventually the formation of Strella.
Fantastic. Katherine, that was a really good presentation. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I could have used this in high school. We tried to test the shelf life of a Twinkie, and this would have been huge help for us back then. I can tell you, though, that the urban myth that a Twinkie will last forever does not exist. They lasted maybe 6 months before turning into a brick.
But this was in your locker.
This was in the locker.
That's
It was sketchy.
There were some other gases.
We don't know what
There was
in
something
there.
going on clearly in that locker.
I thought she was amazing. I thought
so,
mean,
too.
Yeah.
It's this reminds me of when I see a Series A or Series B pitch as a pre-seed investor. I have to always remind myself, it's a lot easier to fall in love with the story, a founder, a pitch in a business when it's up and out, and much harder, as we've seen, when the founder is still trying to figure out, what is where the magic is. But it seems like she's clearly discovered it.
How much funding do you need to break into a space like this? I would imagine it's expensive.
Yeah, we didn't ask her about revenue. But I would imagine that the sales cycles are long. You're talking about implementing hardware across the supply chain.
But $600K of hardware, and you own the entire Apple industry within the U.S.
How much? Right. How much? But how much COGS to get the hardware into those buildings?
Hi, I'm Manan Pathak. I'm the CEO and co-founder of BattGenie.
Welcome to Smith Tower, heading to the observatory level.
Slow recharging times and range anxiety are some of the key concerns before wider adoption of electric vehicles. We at BattGenie provide software solutions to enable faster charging and longer battery cycle life for electric vehicles, consumer electronics, and grid storage battery applications. Using our algorithms, we have demonstrated more than 100% improvement in battery cycle life and 40% reduction in battery charging time compared to standard battery charging methods. We are already working with multiple Tier 1 automotive and consumer device companies and already generating revenue from them.
Thanks, Manan. Can you give us a little more color in terms of how you actually measure the batteries? I mean, are you looking at it from at a cellular perspective? And then how do you optimize, obviously, the battery life itself?
So what happens is, the traditional batteries, when we use in cell phones and laptops, they use some sort of empirical models or equivalent circuit-based models to predict battery performance, right? When you look at your cell phone that shows 30% charge remaining, or your electric vehicle that shows that you can drive 50 more miles, that's the software that calculates it and displays it to the user. And they use some very simplistic methods to determine these numbers. What we do is we look at the physics of the batteries in real time. So essentially, what is it that causes us to store the amount of energy inside the batteries? What fundamentally causes the batteries to degrade? What is it? Why does the batteries lose capacity as they get old? And so having an advanced understanding of battery physics along with machine learning models allows us to come up with optimal ways to charge or discharge the batteries depending on the application. So basically, instead of charging the batteries at constant current or constant power, what we do is we do dynamically smart charging. So we would basically change the current with time that goes inside the batteries when you connect your adapter to your cell phone or car, charging station when it's parked at the car at the charging station, so that we get better health for the battery over its entire period of time.
So are you licensing software to the manufacturers, or you're not selling a hardware?
We are not
component?
doing hardware, yeah, because most of our customers, they already have a hardware in place, the cell phone companies, laptop, car companies, that's doing the job for them. And convincing them to upgrade their hardware, it's a much longer sales cycle and extremely hard to do. Whereas if we can provide a software that can readily work with the existing hardware, no hardware upgrades, just a plug-and-play solution, it's much easy to test, we need less capital, and it's easier market adoption.
What does the life cycle of a customer look like? How do you charge for it, and how do you maintain contact with your customer in an ongoing way when you have updates or you have new technology to push to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what happens is when we talk to our customers, everyone wants to know what kind of performance improvement can we provide on the particular battery that they are using in their device. We worked on a Samsung cell, let's say, and we were able to get great results. We go and talk to Apple or someone else. They ask us this question that it's great that this worked for Samsung. How does this work for an Apple phone? And we cannot answer this question unless we have tested it on the particular battery that they are using for their application. So we ask them for cells. We do a small project with them, depending on how long they want us to test the batteries for. Obviously we cannot test for 3 years for a cell phone or 6-7 years for a car battery. We have to do accelerated testing, but even that accelerated testing actually takes about 6 to 8 months, depending on the temperature conditions and a bunch of other factors that they want us to test at. We then share the results with them. We show them that, look, compared to your approach, we can give you X% more life or Y% faster charging. And then they have to decide whether that makes sense for them to invest in this technology and adopt it or not.
Any stories you've heard from customers after rolling out some of their products with this technology embedded? Like, what are the stories you've heard in terms of response or reaction from their clients?
So, we are right now working on multiple projects with these companies, and they are only looking to work with us because they are really interested in extending battery life or reducing the charging time. And one of the key things for us is that they have the internal R&D teams as well, who are trying to develop very similar solutions actually. So our biggest competition, if you think of it, does not come from some of the other startups, more so from the internal R&D teams who are trying to develop these solutions in-house. And they have to justify it themselves of why should they buy from us rather than develop this in-house themselves, right? So far we have the head start. We've been working on this at the company itself for the last 5 years. My advisor has been working on this since the last 25 years of his research, 15 PhD students, 20 postdocs, all of their research has gone into this. And we think that it's much easier for them to work with us, potentially acquire us if it makes sense, than to develop this solution in-house.
Okay. I have one last question. So it sounds like most of the customer engagements you have right now are more proof of concept. You're kind of working through those. So you're still kind of a pre-revenue company is what I'm hearing.
We've had revenue from project contracts. We are now actually discussing multiple licensing deals with our customers.
Okay.
And the thing with batteries is that you have to test it in their device platform.
Yeah.
Because of the safety that's associated with it, right? If 1 or 2 devices catch fire, it's $1 billion loss for these companies.
Yep.
And so they want to be absolutely sure of what goes on inside their device, test it for a period of time before they launch it out there.
Makes sense.
So that's the thing that we are working on. Essentially what we provide is the operating system of the batteries itself that would manage the batteries in any of these devices.
Great. Excellent. Thanks so much for your pitch. That was really informative. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the battery space, I mean, this is a real market. I mean, it is something that a lot of manufacturers, are, definitely looking into. We have a decarbonization practice, and that's one of the areas that our team is keenly focused on, is helping these batteries extend their life, right? And so that alternate charging current, right, keeps the battery memory down, all of those things. And this software-based solution, because everything so far that we've been looking at has been hardware-driven.
Right.
So this is really, really interesting way to go about it.
I thought it was interesting, just the perspective of it's an OS for the actual battery.
He got there at the end. Yeah,
Yep.
I thought that
He
was
got
really
there at
cool.
the end. That was
Yep.
sort of the unlock moment.
Yeah, lead with that, definitely.
Right, and can you make that universal so that gets around the sort of competing with the internal R&D teams? It's like, can we be the standard so that even if we have a solution internally, like it's not the stamped and approved like single source of truth industry best practices, universal, OS for
Exactly
batteries.
right. Hopefully, over time, as they've been able to demonstrate, the veracity of the software and the returns that it can deliver for the battery manufacturers or the end product, manufacturers, that can start to shrink down a little bit once they become a standard, right?
This feels like a deal for Trilogy and T-Mobile Ventures to team up on.
Yeah.
Like you need investors who get the space, who have the patience, who understand the sales cycles. I mean, investors who have lived through wireless development cycles and can think 3 years out, and that's not every software investor.
Yeah. Though it is a space we're keenly looking at, so I found it fascinating. So
that's a deal for WRG.
yeah,
Yep.
we'll have to see.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Nigel Sharp, CEO and co-founder of Quagga.
Welcome to Smith Tower, next stop 35.
Hey, let me tell you about a team of tomorrow builders who have found a way to destroy the world's most indestructible compound, PFAS. PFAS, is Teflon, Gore-Tex, Rain-X, Scotchgard, and unfortunately it's in your blood. The EPA has said there's no safe concentration of PFAS, and it's plaguing our entire country's water system. Unfortunately, with PFAS, there is no easy solution, but we have been funded by 5 federal agencies to build that solution. This is not humanity's last day. That's why tomorrow builders work at Aquagga, and others have invested.
Okay, so what is the regulatory environment regarding this? Because this right out of the gate just seems like an incredible solution to an emergent problem, and if you're first to market and you own the IP, it could be really exciting. So tell us more about that.
So yes, it's really exciting. Yes, we're first to market. And yes, we have a lot of IP around this from multiple universities that have engaged with this. So the regulatory environment is happening on a global level. PFAS, under the Biden administration, have put it under their Environment Action Plan as the #2 issue just following climate change. This is the second largest environmental issue to currently face the nation. That we're tackling, and where regulation currently sits in different states is that states are increasingly finding more and more regulations around how much PFAS is safe to be in drinking water, but the EPA announcement last week has blown all of this out of the water. They have basically said there is no safe concentration, requiring us to do something different with PFAS than we've ever done before with any other previous contaminant, therefore making this the largest contaminant ever.
So who's on the hook for this? Governments? Like, is it like the Superfund cleanups of yore, or is it the producers? Who has to solve the problem?
So at the moment, there's about $6 billion worth of lawsuits against the producers. You would have seen some of this in the news, the 3Ms, the DuPonts, who are now Chemours, who are being held heavily liable for some of the production of these compounds. There was a famous movie in 2019 called Dark Waters that really covers the history of this really well. But then, in addition to that, you've got the government that naturally has to sort of step in. So the US Air Force, for example, have used PFAS in every firefighting foam at every airbase and at every airport across the entire country. And therefore, the government is also liable because we have communities impacted in every state.
So getting funding from 6 federal agencies is a huge feat, so congratulations on that. Typically with the federal agencies, they have pretty specific measurement and timelines associated with that funding. So can you talk us through sort of what the promises were that were made and sort of how you're tracking against those commitments?
Yeah, so it gets complex and nuanced, obviously, with all these different federal agencies, but I can name some of them. So we've been funded by the National Science Foundation, the EPA, the FAA, the Department of Energy, the US Air Force, and like a conglomeration entity as well that kind of works with the DoD. And all of them have really sort of bought into that there is a need to demonstrate technology as a large portion of what they're paying for, and their technology demonstrations at places like Air Force bases or at airports primarily, where a lot of these like PFAS firefighting foams have been heavily deployed and used, so for remediation type projects. And the real challenge has been there that they want to see this technology connect with other technologies which are good at filtering PFAS. So there's a lot of existing technologies that filter PFAS out of water, out of groundwater, out of wastewater, but where do you put it then? And for a chemical that doesn't break down, lasts for thousands of years, the liability is untenable. So that's what they want to see. They want to see how we plug in. So almost all of those projects and grants are about seeing us collaborate or work in conjunction with other technologies. And we've been very successful to date with a number of these contracts and actually demonstrating that. Actually, possibly the most successful in the world right now, and actually showing that we can work pretty agnostically with a number of the existing technologies and treatment trains.
Well, thank you very much for your pitch.
Thank you.
Incredible stuff.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much, Nigel.
Look forward to chatting over lunch about it. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
So I guess I need to go home and throw away all of my Teflon pans and everything in the house because of the PFAS? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the toxicity level, I had no idea.
Yeah, hopefully the amount of PFAS in the Teflon on your pan is sub the dropper full in 20 Olympic swimming pools.
I'm more worried
One
about
could
the
hope.
coffee cups.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
let's be real.
that's pretty crazy. Fascinating technology. I mean, again, solving a real pain point, which is exciting to see. You know, I've looked at, you know, different companies who are doing this, you know, in terms of, you know, wastewater using, you know, nano bubbles, you know, to clear different ponds and water treatment facilities, et cetera.
Wow.
And the water supply is a huge issue for us in the U.S., both just from a health perspective, but also from a strategic perspective, right? So anything like this, you know, to me, just from a personal interest perspective is, you know, for me, fascinating.
I think it's always interesting to see the transition from operationalizing a federal agency consumable. So the folks that are consuming this technology right now are all massive federal agencies like the DoD and the ones he mentioned. And then trying to figure out how to commercialize that with whatever they're about to announce or announcing today in Tacoma. I just think that leap will be sort of the linchpin of, can you go from budgets that are basically unhinged, specifically when you have this directive from the White House under this administration, to then hurtling over to a commercialization cell where they have different things in mind. Like he was saying, they've got to weigh the pros and the cons, they've got to hurdle, they've got outlays,
Right.
they've got costs to consider. And if they're not under the gun from a real compliance threat, the compliance piece probably will be, you know, a decade out in terms of the real stick. There'll probably be carrots and incentives like we've seen on the climate side, but that would be the biggest thing I would be watching, is how do you hurdle?
The only industry I could see probably adopting this quicker would be maybe the oil and gas industry, because they're already looking to remediate these things from heavy water issues coming out of, you know, wellheads, et cetera. So they're already doing things similar to this. So they would probably be an easier adoption curve, I guess, than say like a Dow Corning, for example.
Yeah, I think the theme for this group is time and capital are
Yep,
going to be two big ingredients.
exactly.
Hi, welcome back. So we really enjoyed all of your presentations, and what a great way to come into this day hearing about the good work that you're doing, not only for your companies and for your customers, but also for the world in a much needed area of sustainability. So thank you so much for that. So Manan, we're going to start with you on some feedback. So first of all, incredible opportunity in front of you, and it's clear that the 25 years of work that your counterpart has done in this space is really starting to pay off. We loved how you closed your pitch when you spoke about this as the OS for batteries. I think that's when the idea really came to life for all of us about what you're actually positioning here in terms of that software unlock for your potential customers and their customers. So thank you so much.
Nigel, love the pitch. I think you scared the bejesus out of everybody here on the panel with the PFAS play, but I don't think any one of us recognized, how extreme the problem is, right? And how little of PFAS is really the level that it takes to become truly, truly toxic, right? It's so small. The fact that you've been able to get 6 different federal agencies to support you from a funding perspective has clearly been huge. That you're first to market, all of that, fantastic stuff. I think for us, one of the questions that we really had coming out of your presentation was, how much risk, right, are you and your company taking on? Because now is the remediation agent. So that's one area I think that gave us pause just from a risk analysis perspective. But we do believe wholeheartedly that this is an incredibly important problem that needs solving. And we think you're going to do quite well with that.
All right, Katherine, just loved your pitch. I thought the way you anthropomorphized food and the way that food communicates was a really great hook to get us starting to nod our heads. One thing that kind of did come up as a point of feedback in the pitch is just maybe having, and maybe we just didn't have time to get to it, but understanding, it's great to say that we can spend 600 grand to get into $300 million worth of warehouse supply. We wondered what the cogs are to get there. And I think would have liked to hear more about sales cycle and sort of really some of the challenges that you will probably face getting deployed. But overall, we were really, really impressed and are happy to tell you that you are the winner of the sustainability category for the GeekWire Elevator Pitch. So, great work, and great work to all of you. It was a tough choice.
Well done. Thank you. I like this too. I can't.
This week's winner advances to the finals along with the winners from episodes 1, 2, and 3, who will pitch live on stage in front of over 500 tech and business leaders at the 2022 GeekWire Summit on Thursday, October 6th. Check out all of the season's episodes at geekwire.com/elevator pitch. We'll see you in October at the summit.